Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. The movie theater in town used to play old Disney movies over the summer, each weekend featuring a different film. It was amazing to see Cinderella in all its original glory on the silver screen. These showings were very popular, and you needed to reserve your seats. I wasn't feeling well, so I booked 2 seats for my husband and child to see Peter Pan. The seats were right next to 2 handicap spots, 2 spots with no chairs, just a parking space for wheelchairs. When my husband arrived, there was a man and a child in their reserved spot. The man had other children with him, and they all had seats on the other side of the handicap spots. The conversation went about as you would expect. "Those are my seats." "No, they're not." "Yes, they are. See," he showed the ticket stubs. "Well, I didn't know those were handicap." "Not my problem. Can't you sit somewhere else?" "No, I paid for these spots. Plus, it was a sold-out show." My husband got an employee. "Sir, these are their spots, but there aren't any chairs, not our problem." The man's child sat with another kid while he stood the whole movie giving my husband nasty looks. My husband reported that seeing Peter Pan on the big screen was wonderful, and he was so happy to spend that time with our firstborn. Auntie from my husband's side lives in a different country. Thank goodness for that. Even before my child was born, although her relationship with me and with my husband was not a close one, she started pushing her presents, her gifts, and her plans on us. She doesn't have a grandchild of her own. I managed to put her in her place politely, and things are not happening the way she wished. I thought she would leave us alone, and my husband would grow a backbone and protect our privacy. He claims he is in between, and all he wants is a united family, but I don't think that means protecting rude people and making myself a doormat. So if I am reacting, I have a reason. Fortunately, we rarely talk to her now, but it seems she still hopes for something. I don't get what, but my intuition goes crazy. I mean, we have normal relationships with many people, and our toddler has enough social life, so I'm not worried. But everything with this woman seems to trigger me. We had a short video conversation a few days ago, the second one we had this year. Instead of using that time to check up on our kid and have a light talk, or giving information from her side, which rarely happens, she scolded us for not taking the child to her place for vacation, as if our business is hers. She almost scolded me for being around my kid during the video call, saying that the kid is distracted by me and doesn't want to look at her. At his age, you can't really demand such things. It's childcare age. Is she really that creepy, or am I just paranoid? Her Facebook feed has many quotes. Analyzing them over the past few years since we had our son, they all seem to be directed at me. She plays the victim. She thinks she is being used and treated badly, and things are taken from her. I'm not stupid. She has plenty of issues but seems to be fixated on our personal life and decisions. Again, thank goodness there is a good physical distance between us. I imagine that if I don't take a stand, the next thing that will happen is her speaking to my kid behind my back and convincing him of different things. When he was 1, we had a video call. Again, she used the time to tell us that she couldn't wait for us to bring our son to her place to visit, so she could convince him not to want to come back to mommy and daddy's place again. I would never ever do that to anyone. How can you be that foolish to need that kind of validation from a small child, from someone else's child? My husband thinks she's just plain silly or making bad jokes with good intentions. I don't want to talk to him about it anymore because he won't understand. But I tend to believe that it's not just a lack of common sense. It seems to be intentional and mean-spirited. I work in public services. It was a new role, and I am the first and only one of me. Essentially, this means that my job scope can be pretty broad, and I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. I have also gained the reputation of a no-nonsense problem solver. I cannot for the life of me think why. So when people have issues, they tend to come to me. I was busily hashing out a few tasks last week when I got something else slapped onto my plate. A manager of a service we commission with, appropriately named Karen, has apparently been working her way through people because she isn't getting the resolution she wants. So, one of the managers in finance want me to look into this for Karen. Now, a thing to note here is that every April we increase rates along with inflation, but she didn't get it. The thing is, it's out of our hands. The services we commission from her are funded between us and another separate public service. We pay half, and the other public service pays half. But we haven't paid the increase because the other public service hasn't agreed on anything yet. What can I say? It's the public sector. Our team's conversation goes something like, me. Hey finance manager, I can't actually do anything about this because, finance manager. Cutting me off. This is your job. It's your department that deals with these contracts, so deal with it. I don't care how, just get her off my back. Now that's mostly paraphrased, except for that last sentence which he said verbatim. I don't care how, just get her off my back. I write in chat to confirm. I am to deal with this, and you do not care how, finance manager says. Yes, for goodness sake. I crack my knuckles and get to work, sending her the following email and CCing the finance manager and my own manager. Dear Karen, I apologize for the delay in the inflationary increase for service. However, as this is jointly funded between ourselves and another public service, we are beholden to their financial timeliness. As the other public service has not yet agreed to the 4.1% increase, we are unable to process it. Regardless of how many individuals you contact, this will remain the case until the other public service sees fit to approve. In instances such as these, our recourse should be to head down to the offices of the other public service and begin smacking naughty bottoms. But I fear HR would frown upon such action in these enlightened times. Might I suggest contacting the other public service yourself to expedite the process? I'm sure the finance manager, finance.manager at my place of work, would be happy to direct you to the appropriate contact and answer any further questions. Warmest regards, my name. I then immediately got a Teams call from my manager where for 30 seconds all I could hear was laughing. He asked me what was going on, so I sent him the screenshots of the chat messages between myself and the finance manager and relayed the Teams call. My manager told me that it was not, in fact, my job. How odd. And later that day, the finance manager apologized, but also warned me that in the future, you should probably hold back on the excessive sarcasm, as people might not find it amusing. I think I'm hysterical, personally. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. I'm an 18-year-old male freshman student in college. I had recently moved into my new dorm room and was getting oriented to the struggles and quirks of college life. Since I knew almost nobody going into college, I decided to get a random roommate for the semester, which turned out to be a big mistake. I was unpacking all of my room supplies when my new crazy roommate walked in for the first time with his entitled mother. At first, my roommate seemed like a pretty normal guy, and I had a pleasant conversation with them, which made me feel good about the person I was planning to live with for the next few months. However, in the next couple of days, my roommate became more estranged and slightly aggressive towards me, and almost everything I did. Being naive, I just tried to look past it and thought it would only be short-lived. Boy, was I wrong. The next night at around 2 a.m., my roommate burst into the room out of nowhere, blasting music on a boombox at full volume, along with two male friends I had never seen before, all of them extremely drunk. I was woken from sleep to find the three of them cornering me while I was still in bed. They started to threaten me and even threw punches at me. Being unable to take someone in a fight, I thought my best option was to record as much as I could of what was happening and then get to our floor's resident assistant as soon as possible. After knocking on the resident assistant's door and pleading for help, they opened up, and I was able to tell them what was happening. The resident assistant immediately went down to my room, only to get punched hard by my roommate in the temple as he opened the door. The resident assistant, disoriented, but extremely aware now, quickly closed the door and held it shut while telling me to call the campus police, who were close by. The police arrived within minutes to arrest the three guys after a big struggle. After the resident assistant and I showed the police everything and made a report, the three were taken away, and my roommate was banned from campus housing permanently. It wasn't even a day later when my roommate's entitled mother got my contact information from the online housing info and demanded that I apologize for ruining her son's college experience and getting him arrested, after my roommate could have brutally hurt me if I had not gotten away. She thought I was responsible for this situation. In her message, she stated, "How disgraceful you must be to your family," and "I'm going to sue you after all of the horrid things you've put my son through." I sent her an apology, all right, about how foolish she must have been as a parent for her son to be as psychotic as he was. Obviously, I blocked both my roommate and his mother from being able to contact me in any way from then on. Months later, since housing never moved another person into my room, I turned my roommate's old bed into a nice, relaxing couch for my friends and me to enjoy. We also had an extremely satisfying time giving away all the stuff my roommate left to the kind people on my floor who wanted it. Let me start by saying I love my in-laws, but their spending habits and choices are driving me up the wall. I am having a second grandchild, and they live over 20 hours away by car. I would love for them to live closer, since my kids are most likely going to be their only grandchildren. However, they keep wavering on moving. This wouldn't be a problem, except they can't afford the house they live in. We live in a much more affordable area, so they could get a house as nice as their current one for much less and have the excess to live off. Either way, they need to sell their house. It's a 5-bedroom home with a pool and gardens, and they can't afford the electric bill for it on their fixed income. On top of this, they've bought 2 recreational vehicles in 10 years and can no longer afford their most recent one. My mother-in-law said they always thought they'd be able to afford a groundskeeper and help in their old age. I'm shocked because they were working-class government employees. They made solid middle-class salaries, but they aren't wealthy. Why did they think they should be able to afford all of that? They say they worked hard all their lives, so they should. Well, in my mind, we all work hard, and most people can't afford that. Their solution for being around the grandkids more is to rent a house in our neighborhood. Our neighbor has 2-story, 3+ bedroom homes, and it would mostly be my mother-in-law here, and she would only be here 6 months out of the year at most. She is also suggesting we subsidize this living arrangement, since she will be helping us. We're already paying $20,000 a year in childcare costs, and that will only increase in the coming years. Rent in our neighborhood isn't cheap, and what business does a grandmother alone have renting a 2,000 square foot 2-story home with 3 bedrooms by herself, while also keeping her large home 2,000 miles away? My solution is for us to buy another property nearby. I found an affordable 2-bedroom, 1-bath bungalow that's cute and within biking distance from our neighborhood. We've been thinking about buying another property anyway. It already has bars installed in the bathrooms, so it would be a great setup in 10 years when the parents burn through their money and need care. We can rent it out or use a vacation rental service when a grandparent isn't living there. I showed this to my mother-in-law, and her first reaction was, "There's only 2 bedrooms? I don't know. I'm from the South, and I was raised to be frugal with money. Being house poor was always talked about as the worst thing possible growing up, where you can barely afford the roof over your head, and all your money goes to keeping the lights on. We would hear stories of nicer neighborhoods where people spent everything to appear to have a nice house and didn't have any money left for anything else. Most people in my family bought one house they could easily afford in a decent but not fancy neighborhood and stayed in it until they died. If they had more money, they bought extra houses or stock investments. Anyway, I just needed to vent. I feel like my husband needs to have a sit-down with them and discuss end-of-life finances, but I think they're both just hoping they pass away suddenly from a heart attack in the next 10 years. This story is a bit of a long one, and goes back to when I worked at a casino. For anyone out there who thinks it would be a great job, well, I can tell you right now it's not as glamorous as it seems, especially when you are working in the kitchen. Now, a little backstory, so you all can get the whole picture. When I started working at this location, I was young, still in college, and working 2 part-time jobs. At first, it was just okay. I had been hired as a steward, which is just a fancy term for dishwasher. It wasn't too bad as it had been the same job I had at the last restaurant where I worked. However, there were a few differences. I won't go into too much detail and name all of them, just the ones that are important to this story. The first one, and the one I liked the best, was that since there were so many restaurants, and the stewards were all in one department, we were shuffled around every day. One day you would be working in the steakhouse, the next in the buffet, then the Italian restaurant, the sandwich shop in the bingo hall, and so on. This meant that you were always working with different people, interacting with them, and getting a change of scenery. I was told I was odd for liking this, but my counter was that if you did end up working with someone you didn't get along with, it would only be a while until you worked with them again. The second difference was that this place disliked unions. Twice a year, there would be a mandatory meeting where they would make long presentations on how manipulative unions were. Also, there would be signs all along the employee hallways with anti-union propaganda. After working for the casino for some time, my boss approached me, asking if I wanted to be bumped from part-time to full-time. I said yes, as the benefits were really good. Not only did I get medical and dental insurance, but I also gained access to their lawyers and a few other perks. I guess it was a good thing that I did, because a few months later, there were some major shakeups. I didn't know what caused it, but most everyone there hated the new changes. For one thing, the sick note policy was canceled. This meant that if you were sick, it wouldn't matter if you had a note from your doctor saying that you couldn't work. If you didn't show up, they docked you a point. This resulted in cooks and stewards coming in, vomiting on the floor and in the trash cans because they couldn't afford to lose a point, as it would count against them when it came time for raises. Another change was that they were cutting the number of full-time employees. I was safe along with everyone else who had that status, but if any of us left, that slot would not be filled. There would only be 2 full-time employees per department. Speaking of departments, that leads me to the next big change. Technically, the stewarding department would be disbanded. This meant that while our supervisors would still be there, it would be the chefs and managers of the restaurants who would be in charge of us. This also meant that we would no longer be moving around. I was sent to the steakhouse, and thankfully I had 2 great female co-workers. In fact, we were so good that we were called Triple A, as all of our names began with the letter A. As we worked there, I began to plan moving up within the casino. I knew it would be difficult, but I had a dream of buying my family's cabin from my parents and living up in the country while I finished college. Sadly, my first attempt to become a supervisor failed, and I ended up training the person who got the job. I didn't complain. I just took it as a sign that I needed to up my game. Now, here our story really begins. See, our head chef was being transferred to the Italian restaurant, and the assistant chef was taking his place. This meant we were going to hire a new guy to take his place. Let's call the new guy Kevin. When Kevin first came in, he seemed okay. Not great or awful. He was just there, and we had no real reason to talk most days, as we were usually pretty busy. Then, maybe a month after Kevin started working there, I had my first real interaction with him, and it was something. It was at night with the dinner rush just starting to pick up, and I told my coworkers that I was going to fill up my water bottle before it got busy. They said okay, and that they would begin doing the same once I got back. But before I could leave the steakhouse to go to the break room, Kevin called out to me. "Kevin, Op, where are you going?" "Me. Just getting a drink before we get busy." I told the girls. "Kevin, then why aren't you using the waitstaff drink fountain?" Me, blinking and confused. "We were told when we started that staff are only supposed to get drinks from the break room." "Kevin, don't give me that. I see the waitstaff getting drinks there all the time. You're just going there to waste time. I'm going to have to write you up for this." Me, "Wasting time? The break room is just down the hall. In the time we've spent having this conversation, I could have gone down there, filled my bottle with ice, gotten my drink, and gotten back here." Kevin then opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, the head chef caught sight of us standing there and came over to see what was going on. Before I could open my mouth, Kevin spoke up, explaining the whole thing with a superior look on his face. That, however, faded when the chef spoke. "Chef, Kevin, Op is right. Employees are only supposed to use the drink fountains in the break room. Sai, I'm going to have to talk to the waitress supervisor about this. Op, go get your drink. I need to talk to Kevin in private." So I did. After that, I was pretty much confused by what just happened. At first, I was willing to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, believing that he honestly didn't know about that rule, that maybe chefs and supervisors were allowed to use the waitstaff station, assuming that it applied to everyone. However, when I brought this up to my coworkers, they said similar things happened with them, that he had pulled them over for a minor infraction of the rules, and when they just said they were sorry, he let them off with a warning. So they suggested that he was just marking his territory, and would have gone easier on me if I hadn't questioned his authority. It was after that, however, that I began to notice things. Firstly, the waitstaff was no longer talking with Kevin, as they were upset with him for getting the crackdowns at their station. It was during this time that I began to realize just how often he hung out with them. He was also always calling over my coworkers, asking them to help him with jobs like peeling potatoes for hours, leaving me alone. What's more, whenever I stopped to speak with one of my supervisors, who happened to be a young woman, he would yell at me to get back to work. Slowly, I began to suspect that he had other intentions. These suspicions were later confirmed during that summer. For those of you who have never been in a professional kitchen, it can get hot. And in the summer, it can get really hot, and the odors can sometimes overpower you. On this day, I was working at one of our massive sinks, scraping off the remains of perch and giving the pans a deep clean, when Kevin called me to the office. Now this was odd, as I had only ever been called to the office to get my 10-cent raises while getting a performance evaluation. And neither of those were to happen until January. Curious, I followed him to the small room where he gestured for me to enter first. I did, finding a woman I had never met before sitting at one of the desks there. When I entered, she looked up from her work to give me a curious look that said, "Hello, can I help you?" You know the look. Then Kevin spoke as he shut the door, walking in backwards as he did. "Kevin, Op, you stink, woman. Excuse me?" At this, Kevin jumped before turning around. The woman was looking at him with rage while Kevin looked lost. It didn't take me long to realize that he didn't know she was in there. "Kevin, sorry, I misspoke. I meant he smelled bad. We're getting complaints about his body odor." Now, like I said, the room was small. So small that I felt cramped being in there with two other people. With the way we were positioned, I was pretty close to the woman, who was growing more annoyed. "Woman, I don't smell anything. Sir, would you mind if I get a little closer?" I said it wouldn't be a problem, and allowed her to get close enough to sniff me. She did it maybe 2 or 3 times before pulling away. "Woman, I don't smell anything." That's when I spoke up. "Op, look, if someone said I smell, then I'm sorry. But I'm working over greasy sinks full of chemicals to clean off pans with fried perch on them in a room that feels like 100 degrees. And on top of that, the aprons we are given are not the best." To emphasize my point, I gestured to my shift, which was wet and full of bits and pieces of fish. "Woman, I see. I'm going to have to take a look at those and see if any need replacing. Op, how about you cool down for a bit in the break room? Kevin, you stay. We need to have a talk." After that, 3 things happened. The first was that the stewards got new aprons, which made all of us happy as they hadn't been replaced in years. Second, from then on, if Kevin wanted to talk to me about an issue, another staff member had to be there as a witness. And if there wasn't one, I was to find that woman, who I learned was the steakhouse manager. Third, all bets were off between me and Kevin. While he couldn't pull me to the side like that, he did start yelling at me whenever he could in public. If he caught me standing around, like when I was waiting for the dishwasher to fill up, he would yell at me to get back to work from across the room before going back to talk to one of the girls. He would just berate me for any little thing he could, just to make me miserable. Soon, I came to realize that he saw me as an obstacle between himself and all the female staff members, as I was on good terms with all of them. I even wondered if he thought I was like a harem protagonist based on how many I worked with. For over the next year, I tried everything in my power to stop him, while still trying to get that supervisor position. I went to Human Resources, writing up complaints only for them to ask, "What do you want us to do about this?" And when I went to my head supervisor, he just said that I needed thicker skin. It seemed like every day it just got worse. On top of that, my identity was stolen twice. The first targeting my bank account, while the second one was my tax return. With the bank refusing to help and the legal department of the casino dragging their feet to help me, I was in the red for a long time, making my situation all the worse. There would be days when I would have to collect cans in the break room for gas and had to give away one of my cats. And with Kevin adding to my stress, there were days when I honestly thought about ending my life. Thankfully, there were good people still around. A bunch of my coworkers banded together to give me small packs of food, and some of the line cooks helped sneak out some meats that they were about to throw away. Then came the big night. It had been a concert night on one of the coldest nights of the year. So cold that several keys had snapped in the door locks because they had frozen shut. I had managed to get to my car and turn it on, leaving it running for a couple of minutes, as I headed back to the locker room to enjoy my only comfort left. A book. The plan was to just read a couple of pages and then head out. But before I could get past my first paragraph, the doors to the locker room opened, and there strode in Kevin. He looked around for a moment before his eyes fell on me, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "Kevin, who told you you could punch out up? Not me, that's for sure. I just got a complaint from the night crew saying that your dishwasher is a mess. Clearly, you didn't clean it at all. Now you go back there and clean it right now. And you'd better not see you punching in, or else you'll be fired." With that, he strode out of the room, laughing. For a moment, I just sat there in utter confusion, wondering if he could do that. I felt scared because if I lost my job, then I wouldn't know what to do. I was behind on my student loans. I had to drop out of college by this point due to various reasons, behind on paying my parents' rent, and could barely afford to keep the one cat I had. For the first time in years, I felt so overwhelmed with fear that I felt like I could begin crying at any moment. Then the moment passed, and I was furious. This guy had been doing this to me for too long. It didn't matter if he could or couldn't. I was done with this. I had to get out of there. As I stood up, I found myself making a plan fueled by my rage. I had kept the fact that my identity had been stolen from my parents partly out of shame and partly out of pride. As I wanted to get myself out of this mess, well, no more. I was going to tell them about it and ask if I could move back in with them. I would even ask for help looking for a new job down there. Sure, it would mean losing my dream home in the country, but at this point, being stable was more important. But before I could do anything, another thought crossed my mind, making me smile. He wanted me to wash the dishwasher right now without punching back in? Okay, I'll do just that. So I left the locker room, barely hearing the security guard stationed nearby, as he called out to me. No, I ignored him and everyone else, as I mentally prepared myself to do this. When I got to the kitchen, there were piles of dishes, pots, pans, and a slew of other items that needed to be cleaned in quantities that are only ever seen on concert nights. But I ignored that, as well as the 3 stewards who were working hard, shutting down the machine and emptying it. Night steward, what are you doing, Op? Sorry, but Kevin told me that you told him that no one had cleaned the dishwasher and that it was a mess. So much so that I had to come back and clean it without punching in or else I would be fired. The color on everyone's faces drained. When the first person managed to compose himself, he told me that none of them had seen Kevin, and that the machine was perfectly cleaned when they arrived. Now, hearing this did make me feel bad, as what I was doing would put them behind. But Kevin told me to do this, so I was following it to the letter, while also making sure everyone there knew who sent me. Seeing that I wasn't going to stop, not that it mattered at this point, as the machine had been drained, one of them went to get the night supervisor. While he was gone, the other two began to argue with each other over whether or not Kevin could order us to stay past our shifts and fire us if we refused. It didn't help that the casino had this nasty habit of offering employees a room to stay in when the roads were snowed over, only to make them work all night as they were on call. When the night supervisor came, she asked me what was going on. I repeated my story while cleaning the machine. She said that Kevin had not spoken to her and was gone before stating that he doesn't have the power to fire me. I just told her that I really couldn't take the chance. Then I asked her how to put in my 2-week notice. That confused her even more, asking why I was doing this if I was just planning on leaving anyway. I told her that I would need time to make arrangements for my future, and that getting one last paycheck was important. So I wrote up my 2-week notice, even mentioning why I was leaving before hitting the road. When I got home, it was 3 a.m., and with all the rage now out of my system, I just crashed onto my bed with my uniform still on. The next morning, I was awakened to the sound of my phone ringing. It was the casino. The head stewarding supervisor was asking if I could come in and talk about last night. At first, I told him no, that I couldn't come in early just to come back home. However, he said it was important. Curious, I told him I would be there in an hour or two. When I arrived, I was taken back to the steakhouse office to find it crammed with people. The night supervisor was still there. The night security officer was there. My supervisors were there. Several head chefs were there, and the steakhouse manager was there, looking like her face would erupt into flames at any moment as she stared at the one figure who was sitting. It was Kevin, hunched over in his seat, looking like a child who was in timeout. I was then told that they knew what happened. After I had my talk with the night supervisor, she went to security and found footage of Kevin looking out the door before heading towards the locker room, and finishing off with him leaving with a grin minutes before I left the room. After that, she called in Kevin to show up the next morning. He tried to lie his way out of this, stating that it never happened and I was just lying to get him into trouble. The supervisors then said that it was a simple matter to check, as they have the security guard who was by the room, and that they can check the footage. Instantly, he remembered that he had spoken to me. Only I had misheard him, and that he would never tell me to work without punching in. The night supervisor and the others in the room then asked, "Why would Op lie? Who told you that the machine needed cleaning? Why would he be the only one who needs permission to leave?" And so on. Over and over, Kevin tried to lie only to change his story again and again, until finally he realized he had been caught. The steakhouse manager then turned to me before apologizing, asking me if I would consider staying. The head manager also apologized, asking the same. For a moment, I was going to say no, but then I had a stupid idea, that if I did this, then I might have a shot at becoming a supervisor myself and not have to leave. So I said sure, but only if Kevin never talks to me again. If he has a problem with what I'm doing, he'll have to run it by the head chef unless it's an emergency. They agreed. Later, I heard a few stories on why they finally acted. The first, and least likely in my opinion, was that this incident finally caused someone higher in the food chain to notice all the written complaints I had on Kevin and was demanding answers. The second was that they didn't want to lose me just yet. Remember how I said that we used to move around from area to area? Well, it turns out there were now only 2 employees who knew how to work in every restaurant, meaning I could go into any area and know instantly where everything goes and how that area operates without wasting anyone's time. But the most likely reason was due to the union. News about what had happened the night before had spread throughout the casino faster than I ever could have imagined, and if they didn't take care of this, there was a greater chance that the union reps would seize on it. In the end, I stayed in the steakhouse longer than Kevin did, as he left 2 years later. But before he did, I offered to throw a pizza party for everyone the day after he left. Update: there are plenty of questions and comments that people had, so I decided to write this up in order to answer as many of them as possible. First, the length. Did anyone read the first sentence of my post? It said right there that it would be a long one. So why complain when I told you in advance that it was long? For others who said that the first part was fluff, I wanted to paint a picture of the area I worked at, the conditions that myself and others were under, as well as some things that would have been important later, like the potential of me being one of the few people who knew how to work in every area helped me. Second, my car. Yes, I did turn off my car. Sorry that I forgot to mention it. Third, legal issues. Some of you have asked why I didn't try to sue the casino, Kevin, or just said that I should. To be honest, I did fantasize about doing just that. However, seeing how the casino is on Native American land, any and all legal issues were brought before a council, and it was well known that any time an employee tried to go before them, the house was more likely to win. Also, given how my financial state was, I didn't believe at the time I could afford a lawyer or what would have happened if we lost. Fourth, why I stayed so long. This was something I had thought about including in my original post but decided against doing so because of the length. The sad reality was that there were not a lot of good-paying jobs at that point in time due to a recession going on at the time. So jobs were hard to find. Now I could have tried to transfer to a different department, but remember how I talked about being a full-timer? Well, at the casino, when you transferred to a different department, you had to start from the bottom, meaning whatever raises you had gotten would have vanished. Not only that, but I would have lost my full-time status. So not only would I take a hit to my paycheck, but I would have lost my benefits like health and dental. I admit that I was too scared to go on without them for an unforeseeable amount of time. Fifth, Kevin's punishment. At the time, I was just happy to know that something was being done, even if I couldn't see it. Now there are a few of you who said I should have asked for his job, but the problem is that that's not how it works. An assistant chef is not a position that just anyone can take, as it takes years to learn and work up to. I did not have the skills or the training to even become a line cook at the time. Sixth, the ending. Once again, sorry, as I know that it does feel unsatisfying. I know many of you were expecting something more grand. However, this is something I have learned in life, that you will rarely ever get the grand finale. Instead, I have learned to accept my victories when I get them, and move forward. Sadly, I never did get to keep the cabin. While I did manage to work my way out of the identity theft issue, I never did get the supervisor job that I had been working for. In the end, I gave up when they told me the reason I didn't get the job was because, you follow the rules too well. That was the final straw. Still, life has gotten 1,000 times better for me. Because I stayed in this hellhole, I was able to meet the love of my life. Shortly after that final rejection, I extended my search to find a new job. While the cabin and home I love so much is gone, I now have my own home with my wife. So in the end, I am living a comfortable life. I call that the best revenge. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.